Wait, how does it go? Hello, welcome back to Run It By My Lawyer. I am super excited. I want to wish all the veterans out there a happy Veterans Day. As always, it's on November 11. Just a little historical facts. November 11, 1918 is the last day of fighting in World War I. And since then, that became the day to commemorate veterans. And little known fact, Veterans Day does not have an apostrophe in it. All right. I remember one time I wrote it down somewhere with an apostrophe and then I looked it up later and it doesn't. Little Joe Samo trivia. I'm very good at trivia. That makes no important impact in the world. Okay. Like where to put an apostrophe. Okay. So on a serious note, with Veterans Day, I have a lot of friends, a lot of clients that are veterans, and it is so hard for me to understand how it happens that every single day about 20 veterans die by suicide. Every single day. It is something that is just unconscionable, right? And how that happens and why that happens, I can't even like fathom it. And when I did some research before today's show, one of the reports I was reading says that statistic might be way off. And I was like, okay, good. And then it said, because it may be higher than 20 a day. So it's a tough situation. And of course, anyone that has those kind of thoughts, there is the National Suicide Hotline, 800-273-8255. That's the phone number for that. And today what we're going to talk about is a few different legal issues and lawsuits pertaining to two cases of veterans who died by suicide, and kind of then the aftermath of the family seeking legal redress and filing a lawsuit, and kind of how the Veterans Affairs Office and how the Veterans Hospital kind of treated those lawsuits, and kind of like, so you're going to hear the stories of these two military veterans and kind of their families and how the lawsuits are addressed and how the lawsuits kind of, what the legal issues are. And the one thing I will say is I'm kind of old. I remember a movie in the 1980s. It was First Blood, Rambo. Now, after that first movie, the Rambo kind of took on a different character. He became like a Superman superhero or something. But in the first movie, and it was a 1982 movie, First Blood, and it was based on this book from 1972. And it was about an Army veteran who, after the war, he suffered from a lot of PTSD. And if I'm not mistaken, First Blood is probably the first movie that really addresses that, because at the end of that movie, Rambo, this Army veteran, and he was a big shot in the Vietnam War. He handled big military equipment. And after the war, he never got his life together. He suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And the movie kind of shows it. And at one point, his former boss, like his commander, he tells him, he's like, "It's over, Johnny, like it's over." And then what does Rambo say?
Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off!
Nothing is over. And that's what it is. It's like after the war, like after everything is over, in the actual like psychological kind of mental issues like still stay on even when everything is over. In reality,
nothing is over.
Right, as Rambo says. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is discuss a few. I am a lawyer, right? So it's more let me say popular or more common now that there's more lawsuits kind of blaming the doctors for not recognizing PTSD, not treating it correctly, not doing the proper things medically, and then when somebody does die by suicide, there is a question of whether or not the medical provider is at fault. Like, could they have done something different? Should they have done something different? Did they breach their standard of care? All right. So the first case we're going to go over is the case of a Navy veteran, Mr. Gary Presley. He's a good guy. He was in the Navy from 2008 to 2012. he received the Navy Good Conduct Medal and some other awards. He was then honorably discharged in December 2012. What happened while he was in an active Navy here in stateside, he got in a car crash and it severely, he had a hip fracture, his pelvis was broken, he had a lot of back pain, and it was so bad that he had to be discharged from the Navy, okay? So he got an honorable discharge, and this is where kind of things start really rapidly, well, in one way rapidly, in one way slowly. It depends how you want to look at it. Things started deteriorating for Mr. Presley. He, after this car crash in 2013, he to treat his pain, he was taking oxycodone, and he eventually became what you can say addicted to these pain medications. It was really bad, and he kept taking that. At some point then, they also were giving him lidocaine and hydrocodone. Probably pronounced that word wrong, right? So they were giving him all this pain medications. He became addicted to it over the years. And then in 2018, the doctor, his doctor, right, the VA doctor, she wanted to get him off of these pain medications. So starting in 2018, they started decreasing it. And this is where in the reports and whatnot, it says he freaked out. What does that mean? He freaked out. The pain became unbearable. Now, the situation with a lot of these cases with the veterans, it's not, it's like what they went through in the military and then the aftermath and then kind of like what life is like after. So it's not, just the military. It's like there's, obviously here it was this car crash and the pain from it and all of that. Now in 2019, he ended up committing suicide on April 5, 2019. And there was a lot of kind of ways that it went toward that. In 2019, early 2019, instead of getting pain medication, a lot of times he would get monthly injections, okay? And then the monthly injections, well, it was pain medication, but through injections as opposed to kind of a daily taking the pills type of thing. And that wasn't working well, and it wasn't kind of treating the pain very well. So he was complaining about it. And, talking to the doctors about this and complaining about the pain and all that. On April 4, 2019, the doctor said, okay, well, if we're going to get you back on these opioids and this pain medication, we want you to take a urine test. So he takes a urine test. They wanted to do a urine sample just to see, what is healthy, what is not healthy to give him. He does that. And then on April 5, he went to the pharmacy to get pain medications. The pharmacist says, we can't give it to you, So he goes to the VA hospital. He even, he told his sister, if I don't get pain medication, I'm going to kill myself by 5 o'clock today. And his sister called the VA and said, my brother is in the parking lot right now with a loaded gun. And he's going to kill himself unless we stop him somehow or he gets this pain medication and because she was in a different city, right? The VA hospital, with that phone call and with talking to the sister, did nothing, okay? They just didn't do anything. They didn't send a police officer there. They didn't kind of go to the parking lot and stop it or try to stop it. I don't know. I don't know what happened, right? It's kind of, I would think if you get a phone call like that, someone's in your parking lot and with a loaded gun, they're going to kill themselves. I would think that they would, if I had that call, I'd call 911 or dispatch or something. I would figure something out. I would run down there, right? But they didn't do anything, okay? And sadly, right around 5 o'clock, he shot himself in the heart, okay? And now comes in his case with Mr. Presley, it's his mom that then files a lawsuit against the United States of America. And just kind of like some legal issues, you can't just sue the United States of America. She had to go through the Veterans Affairs Office and it's called exhaust the administrative remedies. So she went to the Veterans Administration Office and tried to figure out why this happened, how this happened, why they couldn't stop it, why they didn't notice all of his complaints about pain medication. Why that day that they called, they didn't do it. That call to the VA was around 2:30 p.m. So, it could have been enough time to stop it type of thing, right? So the Department of Veterans Affairs did not resolve the case in her favor. Okay, so they denied her claim, it's called, right? So then she's, after she exhausts that administrative remedies, she's then allowed to file a lawsuit in the federal court, which is what she did, all right? So then she files that lawsuit. It was February 2021. This is 2 years later, okay? And a lot of people always ask me, why do things take so freaking long in the law? It's because she wasn't even allowed to file her lawsuit until all of that administrative paperwork was done. And as everybody would agree, administrative paperwork sounds like a nightmare. It sounds like it just takes forever. It does. And it did for Mr. Presley's poor mom, okay? So she filed her lawsuit in February 25, 2021. And the way it worked there is in that lawsuit, so they, took depositions, they interviewed everybody, they interviewed the police officer that finally saw the guy in the parking lot. They interviewed the switchboard person that did nothing after she was told all of this by his sister. They hired doctors to kind of look at the pain medications and how it was being administered and what he was complaining about and how the doctor should have responded to those complaints. They made a good case, the family, saying that there should have been better pain management doctors. A lot of times the doctors that were treating him were not pain specialists. They were, the general doctors and things like that. And that it's, they had an expert for the plaintiffs that said they should have had a better type of, either a psychiatrist that then came on, because the complaints were also, mental health complaints in addition to I'm just in a lot of pain complaints, right? They didn't do that. They didn't have the right psychiatrists on board, and they didn't have the right pain medication doctors on board, and they didn't kind of, foresee this coming, right? Which is hard to foresee something coming, but the plaintiff's case is they should have foreseen it coming. And then finally, in late 2021, the United States of America government, the federal government, paid a $1 million settlement to the family. All right. I mean, I don't know. It could have been different. It could have been that if it went to trial, like if a judge would have said, no, this case has to go to trial, I'm not going to dismiss the case on a summary judgment, meaning a jury should hear this case. I don't know how a jury would have responded. My gut feeling is that everyone thought that a jury would rule against the federal government or the hospital administrators who work for the federal government in terms of how they administered this guy's case, And so that case was settled for $1 million. Okay, in the next case, the case of Bro Dash. So he was a U.S. Army veteran, and he was deployed in Iraq. So he saw active, deployment. He was in theater, as they say sometimes, in combat, and he was at 2 deployments to Iraq. And there was very specific things that happened that, that in his case, it was very detailed, things that happened during that war in Iraq. He saw, and he was ambushed at one point, like his troop was ambushed one point. He actually had a physical fight with an enemy. He witnessed one of his soldiers getting crushed by, one of the army vehicles. So, he actually saw the soldier being crushed. He saw the bloody, body after. Him and his buddies tried to revive that guy. They couldn't. He had 2 friends of his that were in a rollover crash at one point in Iraq, and so he wasn't able to do anything. And then he also saw in some of the fighting, he saw some kids getting killed. Little kids that were in the neighborhoods and whatnot getting killed. So obviously, all of this very, very traumatic, right? So he then, after the war, Sergeant Dash, he had a wife and 3 kids, all right, and he always had these problems of this post-traumatic stress. And then in his case, then he tried to or he attempted suicide in like it was 2017. And then again, he attempted suicide in March. Now, these dates are very important. March 11, 2019, he tried to commit suicide at home. His wife, called 911. 911, the police came. They saw that he had tried to hang himself. And then they involuntarily admitted him to the hospital, meaning they call this in California a 5150 hold, which means if somebody is a danger to him or herself, then they can kind of take that person against that person's will to a mental hospital. I remember a story when I first started practicing law. This was about 22 years ago. Okay. I remember a case where a lady called and she said, yeah, the police came and then they just took me to the hospital. I didn't want to go. And I said, you didn't want to go? She goes, no, I didn't want to go. And I'm like, what? And she goes, then she sent me the medical file and it said, patient does not want to be here. Patient tried to leave. We basically shackled her and kept her at the mental facility. And here I am, a young, dumb lawyer thinking, oh my God, this is the biggest crime in the world, man. And then I researched it and no, hospitals can do this. It's an involuntary hold. And in California, they can do it for up to 3 days with no court order or anything. And then after 3 days, if they want to hold the person there against their will longer than 3 days, they have to get a court order. And that court order could go up to another 2 weeks. And then after that, they have to have another court order. Like it's kind of a heightened standard there. Okay, so anyway, so now comes what happens to this guy. So he's there, and some of the problems that kind of escalated, things that they could have detected and what he was saying and what he was complaining about. So at this time in his life, he was having a lot of financial issues. He couldn't hold a job. He lost his job. He was having financial issues. And then to make things worse, the VA realized that when he was honorably discharged, they accidentally overpaid him by about $20,000, okay? So they sent him a letter saying, oh, we just realized that a long time ago we overpaid you, last year or whatever it was, by $20,000. So what we're going to do is just not give you any more money, like in terms of pension or anything else, until we get back that $20,000, all right? So that was very distressing to Sergeant Dash to get that type of letter. And then on top of that, his wife's father died. So his father-in-law died, and that was traumatic for him because he saw his father-in-law. His father-in-law had Crohn's disease, and he was kind of in all this pain. And then when he died, and how his wife was grieving, kind of brought out a lot of those memories. And this is how he described it. And that kind of all of these things together led to his suicide attempt in March of 2019. Now the hospital then they have him on an involuntary hold. And the reason why I'm giving all these details is because it becomes very relevant in the lawsuit. Like I said earlier, the legal aftermath, right? In terms of the legal aftermath, it's like the lawyers and everyone else, kind of pick apart exactly what happened, and then to try to determine, how can we prevent this from happening again? Who should be accountable for this, if anybody, right? And that's why these are the details that the lawyers kind of look over. Okay. So then Sergeant Dash, he is in this involuntary hold, and he's at the VA hospital in Riviera Beach, Florida, and he's in the mental facility there, right? 3 days later, he hanged himself, and it was really bad because it was in the mental ward, and it was in his room. And somehow the room had, you could close the door completely, and so nobody could see what's going on, which is unusual, right, for a facility like that. And God, this is so hard to go over, but so he had closed the door, and even the door itself, it had one of those. It was like a corridor door, it's called, and it had this mechanism that kind of helps close the door, right? And then those could be used as an anchor for, and he used his clothes as kind of a rope and all that. The reason why I'm going over those details is because obviously then in the lawsuit, right, some of the questions were, how the heck did the hospital not foresee this, right? How did he's going through all these problems. He obviously has PTSD. He attempted suicide. How in the world do they have a setup where, somebody could be out of, everybody's like visual sight. It's a little repetitive, visual sight. You know what I'm saying, right? Okay. So how did that happen that they could do that where it's like that, and then believe it or not, there was a report in 2008. So about 10 years before this happened to Sergeant Dash, where there was a report, and it was by the Department of Veteran Affairs. And in the report, they actually said, for this facility, they said interior doors and cabinet doors can often be removed or replaced by accordion doors that cannot be used as anchor points. Right? So that's not good for the federal government there. So they even cited, they said in these, the medical ward, they cannot have something that could be used as an anchor for someone to try to kill himself. All right. Now, so that happens in March 2019. Just like in the other case, the wife of Sergeant Dash. Now, by the way, in a wrongful death case, all right, here's a little bit of legal education here. In the other case, it was his mom that filed the lawsuit because in that case, Mr. Presley did not have a wife and did not have kids. The reason why I say no wife is he did have a serious girlfriend, but it was not his wife. And the reason why that's important is to have standing to file a lawsuit for a wrongful death, meaning, my buddy died or my son died or my husband died. The only people that could file a lawsuit is a mom or dad or a legal, ding, 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 legal husband or wife. And I keep saying legal, meaning like they have to be married by the law. It used to be the case, right? Like same-sex marriages, if they were not legal, then a same-sex marriage couldn't file this lawsuit. But that obviously changed over time. And if somebody they get married at the church or the, mosque or wherever, but they don't get married in the law, then they don't have standing. Okay. So only mom, dad, a legal husband, wife, and then children. Okay. So those are the only people that have standing. So his girlfriend in the other case couldn't file a lawsuit. His friends that were all sad about this, they can't file a lawsuit because they don't have standing. Like a friendship, as grieved as you may be, cannot file a lawsuit, okay? So now with Sergeant Dash, his wife files a lawsuit and, on behalf of the 3 kids, file a lawsuit. Okay, so it took them almost 3 years to get through all of the administrative, because sadly, after this, what's it called? I just realized something. So, he died on March 14, 2019. That was one day after my mom passed away. She passed away on March 13, 2019. I just realized that. Okay. So anyway, it took her 3 years to exhaust the Veterans Affairs process. And the reason why is, there was COVID, so that delayed everything. So it took her 3 years to get a letter from the Veterans Affairs saying, we deny your claim. And then only after all of that, she was able to file the lawsuit, and she filed the lawsuit in February 2022. So early this year, she filed the lawsuit. And again, the lawsuit claims that the Veterans Hospital did not, accurately foresee or did not accurately treat his PTSD. They should have seen, because of his 2 previous attempted suicides, including one 3 days before, and the fact that he was involuntarily being held there, they didn't properly treat the PTSD. They should have had, they should have put him in a place where they could see him all day, right? So that, he couldn't have done what he did, outside of everyone's view. okay? And that, right, yeah, that was basically what it is. Like I said, 20 veterans a day. And now the legal cases in terms of who is supposed to be held accountable, a lot of times, obviously, it's the doctors, right, that are the first to blame, so to speak, because if they would have treated him differently, if they could have prescribed him different medication, if they could have monitored him better, maybe it would have made a difference. Maybe he wouldn't have been able to die by suicide, okay? Now, this case, Sergeant Dash's case, being pursued by his wife, Emma Dash, it is still ongoing. And I looked through the federal docket to see what is currently going on in his case. It's kind of, here's a little example of what happens in these legal cases. So for the family to convince a jury that the doctor screwed up, they can't just say, oh, this is what happened. Come on, jury, the doctor screwed up. They have to have other doctors that are experts in the field, and those other doctors who are experts in the field have to say things like, well, this is the standard of care in the medical community. This is what they should have done. This is how the doctors should have acted, blah, 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 right? And then the federal government will have their own doctors that say the doctors were careful. The doctors did act pursuant to the standard of care. And it's sad these things happen even when the doctors are careful. And those doctors may say something like, well, we don't have all the patients in view at 24 hours a day because then the lack of privacy may upset patients more. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not a doctor, right? So, and I certainly I don't work in one of those facilities. So, and lawyers don't. Okay, so that's why the lawyers hire these experts, right? Because then the experts kind of go through all of this. All right, just to give you a little how nuanced the case gets. The family hired one of their experts is Dr. Stephen Bruce. He is a PhD psychologist, and he renders the opinion that when somebody, they're there for an attempted suicide and it's like within a few days, he's saying that the standard of care, he should have had more appointments, he should have been in better view, he should have been prescribed different medication, he should have had more monitoring, all that jazz. So this is what Dr. Bruce is saying. Now, then the federal government filed this motion. This was on October 24th, so just a couple of weeks ago. So the federal government, before a trial, they filed this motion, and it's called in California, it's called a motion in limine. All right, a motion in limine is a motion to kick out certain evidence. All right, so the jury never hears it. The federal government is saying that this particular doctor should not be able to testify at all. And the reasoning is because Sergeant Dash was being treated by a psychiatrist at that hospital, and that this guy, Dr. Bruce, is not a psychiatrist, he is a psychologist. And it was not a situation of therapy. It wasn't, it was more about monitoring maybe, and the psychiatrist prescribed medication that the guy had to take, and that, some of the theory is that medication wasn't properly prescribed, okay? And so this motion is saying, well, Dr. Bruce is not an expert in those fields, and so therefore he should not be able to testify at all. Now, this is a big deal, because imagine if then they don't have a doctor that can testify, right? And it's not easy to get doctors to testify against other doctors, right? They're in the same community. So they don't testifying against each other, right? So they found a doctor that said all this. And their position, the family's position, is that, well, but the whole point is not necessarily just about the medication. It's about the monitoring and kind of the how the mental ward is set up, and that a PhD psychologist does have the expertise to render an opinion on those things. And the federal government, like I said, they filed a motion saying, no, that particular doctor does not have that type of expertise. We should have a psychiatrist only testify about that, because the main issue is the medications that they kind of forced him to take during those 3 days after he was arrested. I don't want to say arrested, after he was detained at the mental ward. The medication is the important thing, not particularly kind of like how the ward was set up. I'm only going over this because this is what's recently going on in Sergeant Dash's case, and it's just so nuanced, because this says, there will be an order on this one day, and who knows, maybe one party appeals it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if the family loses, they may appeal that. And then before a trial happens, like, it has to go to an appellate court, and then the appellate court decides, they send it back to the trial court. All of this happens before a trial. It's always funny why people ask me, why does this lawsuit take so long? Why does a lawsuit? The poor guy died in 2019. Okay, we're talking, it's going to be up on 4 years, coming up in 4 years. It was early 2019. Why? And then the lawsuit, there's no trial even scheduled yet. This is one of the reasons, one of these little nuanced things. Okay. Happy Veterans Day. I love all the veterans out there. I want to support the veterans. These are, some of the things, the kind of the legal aftermath after they serve our country. God bless all the veterans. Okay. And like I said, I had some people call me over the last week, as I always encourage everyone, run it by my lawyer, okay? Anytime you have a question, you can even call me, 619-672-1741. And happy Veterans Day, and I love you all, and see you next week.